Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm John Nugent, the 2020 chair of the Houston Association of Realtors. As you know, normally we would be meeting over breakfast at Tortilla Coast in Washington, D.C. to meet with our legislators. However, due to the current pandemic and our new normal, we are meeting virtually and meeting on the Hill in Houston. So let's first give a big thanks to Karen Driscoll, our HAR Director of Political Affairs, TREPAC, and Amber Burton Alvord, HAR Director of Governmental Affairs and Advocacy, for their hard work in setting up this meeting. They'll be here with us throughout the program, answering questions throughout this chat. Our moderators for this morning's meeting are HAR Governmental Affairs Co-Chair, Kenya Burrell Van Wormer, and Michael Mcgann. Kenya was the 2018 chair of HAR, and both Kenya and Michael have served in numerous leadership roles throughout HAR's years of political advocacy, and we look forward to them moderating today's meeting. We are also very pleased to have with us this morning, joining us for this meeting, several members of Congress from the Houston delegation. These members include Dan Crenshaw, Lizzie Fletcher, Kevin Brady, Randy Weber, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Brian Babban. They will all be joining us this morning. Members of Congress, we really want to thank you for your time this morning and what you're doing for us in Washington. I'd also like to recognize each member of Congress's federal political coordinators, the FPCs, for all their communication between members of Congress and the association. Thank you all for your service and dedication to the real estate industry. We would also like to welcome the following attendees of today's meeting: the HAR Board of Directors, HRIS Board of Directors, NAR Directors, Governmental Affairs Advocacy Group members, and Political Affairs Advisory Group members, and all the PAL members and TREPAC members that will be joining us today. At this time, I'd like to pass it over to our moderators, Kenya and Mike. So if you guys would, please take it over and run from here.
Directly with our members of Congress. So instead of serving up some eggs and some great Mexican food and coffee and juice that we would normally have at Tortilla Coast, we're asking to serve you in a different way. We're excited that everyone can be here. We know that this is virtual, so it's a little bit different, but it's still great to see each and every one of you on this call. The mid-year meetings in Washington, D.C. are really some of our best moments and opportunities to be in front of our congressional representatives, but this is offering us a different way of still being able to stay in touch and share some of our legislative priorities. Serving as your Governmental Affairs Advisory Local Issues Chair for 2020, it's a pleasure to see you today and great to be able to work with Mike Menden. Mike, over to you.
Mike actually got disconnected, Kenya, so if you could kind of step in for him, that would be really helpful. We're trying to get him back on.
You all may know Mike Menden. He is the co-chair for the Governmental Affairs Advisory Group, and we are just beyond honored to be able to serve and continue to share information with our members about our priorities. So we're going to step right into this right now. And our first guest is a sincere pleasure to have today. She's been nothing but a rock star for the National Association of Realtors since she began in her position, and even more so now during this pandemic. Gina Mcgann is the Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs for the National Association of Realtors. She is a member of the association's advocacy group, is responsible for managing NAR's federal, legislative, and political affairs and political representatives teams. She provides strategic advice on public policy, issuing impacting NAR and helps direct its independent expenditure and public advocacy programs. Before joining America's largest trade association, McGann served as a staff director for the House Financial Services Committee, and prior to that, as a counselor to the United States Treasury Secretary. She also held communications roles for 3 members of the House leadership team during her nearly 20 years at the Capitol. McGann earned her BA in history from the George Washington University. A native of Westerville, Ohio, she currently resides in Alexandria, Virginia, with her husband and 2 sons. And to say she has been busy during this pandemic is the understatement of the year. Thank you so much for all that you do, and please help us welcome Gina Mcgann.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Kenya. I appreciate that very kind introduction. If I can go back and edit that a little bit, one thing that's in there is while I am a Buckeye from Central Ohio, I did get to Texas as soon as I could, and I lived in the Houston area for a couple of years, working for then House Majority Leader Tom DeLay on his campaign. And so it was a wonderful experience, and I try to get back to Texas whenever I can. So while I'm sad that we aren't able to see each other in person, if there is a silver lining to having these congressional visits virtually, it's that our feet should be feeling so much better now than they were this time last year. It is a lot of walking around Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and this is a little bit more comfortable with my coffee and a more casual attire. So I want to give you guys just an update on where things stand now. You know, I run our federal advocacy group when it comes to the legislative side. And our mission is to support the policies and the policymakers who support you. And these last couple of months have been crucial in those efforts. As you're aware, there have been several legislative emergency responses to the pandemic, and your fantastic lineup of congressional speakers are going to get into that. But I'll just give you a quick recap as to what our efforts focused on and continue to focus on as we go into the next phase. So first, we looked at members and the consumers and to find out how self-employed and independent contractors are covered in any of these programs. So that included the Families First Act, which was the bill that included paid family and sick leave, and then also the CARES Act, obviously the $2 trillion huge legislative package that included small business loans, grants, the direct cash payments, unemployment benefits on the federal level, and tax benefits as well. So then we looked at the consumer and the transaction, and how can we ensure that there are forbearance and mortgage assistance efforts, and that the transaction can continue while we're working with very restrictive stay-at-home orders. That includes things like a federal option for remote online notarization, which if you are an FPC, mentioning you, Vicki Fullerton, or any of the FPCs on this call, that is one of the items that you would have received in your packet, and that we have been working with a bipartisan and bicameral group of members to ensure that there's a federal option for remote online notarization for the states that don't allow it. And then finally, we looked at the real estate industry as a whole. How is it that these transactions can occur on a macro level? That includes the essential services designation that came from the Department of Homeland Security. In the second round, they did include real estate services as part of that. And then that also includes battling in each and every state to ensure that governor's orders, or even down to county officials, that they also include those transactions. We just had a really big win yesterday in Pennsylvania. Had the most restrictive in the country, and the governor finally issued an order to allow for real estate services to be conducted throughout the state. So not all have been as restrictive, but that has been a key one. Also looking at things like extending the deadlines for opportunity zones and 1031 like-kind exchange. And the other big issue is working with our industry partners and the federal regulators to ensure that these much needed forbearance measures don't unintentionally lock up liquidity in the mortgage marketplace. And that has been a big effort, especially by Joe Ventrone and the federal policy team. So it's worth noting that all of these previous legislative responses passed with overwhelmingly bipartisan, near unanimous support. So as much as we are quick to complain when Congress doesn't work in a bipartisan fashion, they worked quickly and they worked overwhelmingly bipartisan way. But now we're on to the next phase. And with that, you're seeing a much greater sense of partisanship has emerged, to put it delicately. So last week, the House of Representatives returned to Washington to vote on the $3 trillion HEROES Act. And while the process of crafting that legislation has been partisan and widely considered an effort more to identify priorities than to actually get this through the Senate, there were several bipartisan initiatives included that we support. That includes the $5.5 billion in broadband internet funding, which if you heard House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn last week, and we spoke at the general session, that is a big initiative for him as well. The Safe Banking Act. It also includes the elimination of the SALT cap for $10,000 for 2020 and 2021. So you may not want to lead with that one with Congressman Brady, but it's, while it might not be a huge issue in Texas, we represent 1.4 million members and homeowners around the country, and there are many states where that is a big problem for them. It also includes tens of billions of dollars for mortgage relief and assistance to renters, another $10 billion for the economic injury disaster loan, and another round at an increased amount of the direct payments to taxpayers, which hopefully many, if not all of you received. That also includes 1099 filers. So while we're actively engaged with both the House and Senate to highlight those policies we support, we're expecting more movement on this to slip into the June timeframe. And there's also just different issues that are at play with the Senate consideration of this and looking more at liability protections. Also hearing discussions about state and local funding that could come through the Senate version of this as well. But the $3 trillion of the House bill, we're hearing the number 300 billion for Senate negotiations. So it'll probably be somewhere in between the two. Also want to mention, I know the challenges to the oil industry with the oil market facing historically low demand and oversupply and running out of storage. And I know that hits hard and that hits home for you, especially when you're dealing with a pandemic and other economic concerns. I think the oil industry is accustomed to these changing markets and these supply and demand shocks, and they have some great leadership at the helm, and that industry is incredibly resilient and will be available to bounce back when the economy is bouncing back as well. And we've been pointing to our to real estate as being a big source of that bounce back. The pent up demand from the spring market not being able to roll out as it usually does. If you hear the research from Dr. Lawrence Yoon on our team, that pent up demand is going to end up looking at maybe a stronger fall market, and you are still seeing a number of these transactions occur. And we are hearing from many brokers and agents that in their areas that they haven't seen a change. And so a lot of this ends up becoming much more regional, but we're pointing to lawmakers that with the right policies in place and with the right recovery efforts, that real estate can be one of those drivers of economic growth. Also just want to mention that even though this is understandably taking up all of the national conversation and the attention of lawmakers, there still are some other must-pass bills that have to happen before the end of the fiscal year. Yes, that includes the National Flood Insurance Program, which was extended last year for a full fiscal year, but that expires at the end of September. Also expiring at that time is the federal surface transportation funding, known as the Highway Bill, which is widely expected to be a vehicle, pun intended, for a larger infrastructure package. So those are other areas that we're involved with. And also, as we move through those further economic stimulus efforts, we will be pointing to other tax provisions that could be helpful for the economy and for real estate, advocating for the work being done by our Federal Taxation Committee and the home ownership tax credit policy recommendation that we will be rolling out soon. NAR also created a 501c4 called the American Property Owners Alliance, and that organization is designed to ensure that the voice of the property owner is heard loud and clear through these policy debates as well. Finally, but just quickly, it's 2020, it's an election year. I know we haven't forgotten any of that. There are 4 key considerations to keep in mind. I'm sure you guys are still seeing the ads up and running. The US Senate is in play with 1/3 of the Senate up for re-election, and that means Republicans and Democrats by about a 2-to-1 margin. The House Democrats are defending several seats that they picked up in 2018. Many of them are in suburban Republican-leaning districts. You're also seeing a higher voter turnout and engagement that will come with a presidential election year. So that's going to greatly increase the involvement in many of these races. And then wrap all of that up with the significant voting and campaign and electoral challenges that you'll see with the stay-at-home orders and social distancing. And this is going to be a very interesting November. So that is another area where we are active, involved, and ready to roll with all of our political programs as well. Our modernized and advanced advocacy operation is more prepared than ever to take on these challenges and to thrive. So with that, I am happy to kick it back over to Kenya, and I thank you for your time today. And if you would like, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Shannon. You know, it's interesting to think that there's anything else going on outside of this pandemic right now, right? But it is an election year. And thank you so much for all that you are doing to take care of not only consumers, but us in this industry. And my apologies for not acknowledging that you are an honorary Texan. How could I not add that to this script?
I make sure everybody knows it, so don't worry about that.
Not a problem. Next time we introduce you, that is the first line. Forget everything else. Thank you so much for all that you do. It is definitely a labor of love that you do for the association and for us, and for that we are truly grateful. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Going to turn it over to Mike Menden now.
Thank you, Shannon. I'd like to introduce Congressman Dan Crenshaw, proud 6th-generation Texan and former Navy SEAL. On his 3rd deployment, he was hit by an IED blast during a mission in Afghanistan, causing his right eye to have been destroyed and his left eye to be badly damaged. After months of fighting, Dan eventually regained sight in his left eye and went on to deploy twice more. After serving 10 years in SEAL teams, Dan was medically retired in 2016. And in 2018, he was elected to represent Texas's 2nd Congressional District. Congressman Crenshaw serves on the Homeland Security Committee and the Budget Committee. Since being elected in 2018, he's focused on border security, disaster relief funding, port security, cutting frivolous spending, and implementing fiscally responsible policies. Congressman Crenshaw's FPC is Chris Schilling. HAR welcomes Congressman Dan Crenshaw, and sir, I'd like to personally say, go Navy.
All right, well, thank you all so much. Suppose I'll give you a quick update on DC legislation. I think I have about 10 minutes, right? And I don't believe we're doing questions. Is that true?
That is correct at the moment, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, here we are. So the most recent update, of course, is last week's legislation, which I'll just be honest, was a bit of a waste of time. So there was a $3 trillion bill that was passed by the House of Representatives. That was a completely partisan bill that was not discussed at all with Republicans. And you could actually make an argument that that wouldn't even be helpful for the American economy going forward. About $1 trillion of that was meant for bailing out states, mostly states with bad finances previous to the coronavirus pandemic, unlike Texas, for instance, which balances its budget. Other states do not. There's other problems as well that we're seeing with economic recovery. You know, one example, which is weighing on a lot of employers, is the fact that unemployment benefits are more generous than working in some states. Now, the reason that is because in order to be more generous with unemployment benefits, the original CARES Act allowed $600 extra a week to be paid out for unemployment benefits. Good intentions there. I think there's a good argument to be made to make those benefits a little bit more generous, but there's a very bad argument to be made that they should exceed what your paycheck actually was. And the problem is workers laid off don't want to go back to work, at least until July 31st when that program expires. This makes economic recovery rather difficult. So in that, what Democrats propose to do is actually extend that program through next January, which would be pretty devastating for our labor force. I propose that what I call the Jumpstart Act, where we actually allow states to keep $600 a week, states gives the states the option to allow workers to keep that $600 a week even if they go back to work. So it puts the incentives back in the right place, incentivizes you to work, and you don't have to make that difficult financial choice as a laid off worker, because any rational person is going to do the thing that makes them the most money. So the point is in all of that, that's an example of how we should be legislating. We should be looking at one problem at a time and then fixing one problem at a time. And hopefully that starts to happen next week. I'm hoping that my friend Nancy Pelosi and her colleagues got it out of their system, got the $3 trillion wish list out of their system so that we can actually work on real things next week. And there's some indications that that might happen. So for instance, there's tweaks that need to be made to the PPP program. Luckily, it's not running out of money as quickly as the last time, and that's good. But it does need to be extended. So the 8-week limit is a problem, especially for businesses like restaurants that need a lot of help, and we want to be able to extend that. I can't remember. There's discussions on extending it. I won't say exactly how many weeks they're looking at, but that's definitely some good news. Also, there's going to be a lot more fidelity. I think on Monday, actually, SBA and Treasury released the PPP loan forgiveness application, so there's clearer guidance on what it will take to actually forgive those loans. The Main Street lending program is expected to be finalized at the end of May, and at that point, the Fed will immediately begin processing those loans. It's been challenging because it's targeted at small to medium enterprises who often lack access to corporate bond markets, and they rely exclusively on bank lending. And so that involves negotiated contracts that are kind of idiosyncratic and actually may involve asset-based or cash flow-based collateral. So that's been challenging, but they're getting it, and we're pushing very hard for possibly a separate lending program for oil and gas industry, or at least making sure that the oil and gas industry has access to these programs. As many of you know, and I'm sure many of your customers are part of the oil and gas industry, our economy is interconnected. You can't just hate fossil fuels and hope that Houston survives. And unfortunately, we've had problems there too. It's been very difficult to do some common sense legislative things to help our one of our premier Texas industries. And on the bright side, oil prices are going up slightly, and we're working with the administration to see what they can do administratively to simply give the industry a little bit more favorable loans so that they can survive this downturn. Let's see if there's any other updates I want to give here. Another update was we voted last Friday to do remote or proxy voting in Congress. I'm fully against that. I think that's absolutely cowardly, and I think you should always ask your representatives why they're too afraid to go to work. That's just my take. I think it's meanwhile they're ordering food from restaurants and going to grocery stores where people have to physically be there. I don't see why members of Congress don't have to physically be there. It's a pretty easy job. You have to go and you put your card in the voting machine, and it records your vote. So it's a matter of leadership for me. I think we need to be leading from the front for the American people. I would never send men into battle, into situations that I'd never been in myself. And it's this gets at a larger problem, I think, with the way America has reacted to this entire thing. I think we had a good reason to possibly lock down society for a short period of time to make sure our healthcare system was not overwhelmed. I think we're long past that point, long past it. Texas, luckily, was where good reason and good governance prevail. And we've led the way on a staged and safe reopening. And oh my God, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's no apocalypse here in Houston. And who would have thought? And the other thing I've noticed is that there was a lot of worry that when businesses started reopening, that nobody would go because people are so scared. That is not what I am observing out in town. People are out. People are kind of over it. I think over time, we've understood the risks of coronavirus a little bit better. We've understood how to mitigate it ourselves. And I think people are a little less scared and more ready to confront what was a previously unknown risk and what is more of a known risk at this point. So I hope that the bounce back for the economy will be good. How much time do I got? I can keep going, or we could move to a quick question if you guys want.
You have a couple of minutes, and we can do, I have one question that actually came up that somebody would like me to ask you.
Sure.
Thousands have lost their jobs and many cannot pay rent. And you're speaking to a property manager, by the way. We support issues to protect renters. However, we must also support the owners of these properties who also have payment obligations that may be difficult to meet without rental income. So how is Congress working to balance the eviction issue for both renters and property owners?
Well, it looks like there's an update on evictions in Texas that the moratorium lifts next week. And as you note, there's a balance there. I mean, I think the right answer is what Congress has already done. We've made unemployment benefits quite generous. So it's not clear who falls through the cracks there. If you're getting unemployment benefits that are way more generous than they used to be, the idea is that you should be able to pay rent with that. And then further, the idea is that you should be getting your job back pretty soon. I mean, that would be the goal. And the quicker we get the economy back up and running, the better. Because what I see oftentimes is policy ideas that treat symptoms instead of the source. The source is money from the renter. If you're trying to treat the symptoms and you say, okay, well, no more mortgage payments and no more rent payments. And, there's a trickle down effect from that. Okay, fine, no more rent payments. Well, who has to pay the mortgage? Okay, well, that person's going to stop paying their mortgage. Yeah, like I am also somebody who rents property. How would I pay my mortgage? I'm not wealthy. And okay, so now the banks have all these failed mortgages. And what do you have? Well, you have another financial crisis. Because if I recall, I believe that's what happened in 2008. Everybody stopped paying their mortgage. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out what the trickle down effect of this is. So we just need to make sure that people are whole, which was the entire reasoning behind direct cash payments and more and more generous unemployment benefits. Also at the local level, here in Houston, I've seen rent assistance programs from the county level too. So that's the best way to tackle this. Rent forgiveness, mortgage forgiveness, I think that gets very, very messy. I think you just got to hit people directly with the help if they truly need it.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. I have one last question for you. How can we help you?
Oh, just fight for good common sense governance and limiting principles and freedom. That's it. That's all I ask.
Yes, sir. We will do that. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. We are now moving on to Kevin Brady, and I will introduce him. Kevin Brady represents Texas's 8th Congressional District and has since 1997. Prior to his election to Congress, He worked as a Chamber of Commerce executive for 18 years and served 6 years in the Texas House of Representatives. Congressman Brady is the lead Republican on the House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over taxes, health care, Social Security, Medicare, international trade, and welfare. While serving as chairman, Congressional Brady authored and helped pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which reformed the U.S. tax code for the first time in more than 30 years. To stay close to his constituents, Congressman Brady lives in Montgomery County with his wife and 2 sons. Congressman Kevin Brady's FPC is Vicki Fullerton. HAR welcomes Congressman Kevin Brady.
Mike, we don't quite have Congressman Brady.
We had it.
But we do have Congressman Randy Weber on.
Okay, Kenya. I will pass this to Kenya.
All right. Actually, what we're going to do right now is we're going to pivot and we're going to go to Sylvia Garcia's office. And then we're going to go back to Randy Weber and Misty Bacon, who happens to be the FPC. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Patrick, and he will be representing Sylvia Garcia's office during this call. So bear with me just one moment. All right, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia was elected to represent Texas's 29th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018, becoming the first Latina ever to represent the district. She's been a long-time friend of the Realtors prior to this election. She earned a scholarship to Texas Women's University in Denton, where she graduated with a degree in social work and political science, and went on to earn her Doctor of Jurisprudence from Thurgood Marshall School of Law. She served as the presiding judge of the Houston Municipal System for an unprecedented 5 terms, and then was elected city controller, the second highest elected official in Houston city government. She then served 2 terms in the Texas Senate before being elected to the U.S. House, and Congress Sylvia Garcia's FPC is our own Martha Beaudry. HAR welcomes Congressman Sylvia Garcia and her team, and right now we'd like to turn this over to Pat Bond.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm happy to, the Congresswoman is sorry that she's not able to attend. She is dealing with a family emergency and is unable to be here. But she asked me to quickly share that she is very focused on several issues that I think are important to you. Most notably, she has worked on the Financial Services Committee on rental and mortgage assistance programs. There is a $100 billion rental assistance program in the HEROES Act and a $75 billion program for mortgage assistance. This is flowing from, as Congressman Crenshaw said, focused on targeting these issues, not looking at rent forgiveness, but looking at rental assistance. And I think that these programs are there and a piece of that program. I don't want to continue when I know that there are other members, when there are members waiting on the call. So I am happy to stay to the end and answer questions, but I don't want to take staff time in front of members.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Pat. We do appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And if you wouldn't mind standing by, we will have questions towards the end of the session. So thank you. And please thank the Congresswoman for all the hard work that she does to fight for all Realtors. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike Menden.
Hi, Congressman Brady, I gave you a wonderful introduction a couple of minutes ago, and I know you are on a time crunch, so I am going to skip repeating it. You know it, and everybody else has already heard it. So with that, Congressman Kevin Brady.
Great. I'm going to take your word for that, Mike. So to Mike and Kenya, thanks for again leading the government affairs role for HAR. It's just so important. I wish we were at Tortilla Coast this morning, but we're going to return to that. The Senate is working already. I'm hopeful the House at some point goes back to work up there. But again, thanks for your leadership role. And I want to give a shout out to my old friend, dear friend, Vicki Fullerton, who was just elected regional vice president for Region 10, which is for Texas and Louisiana. I just hope she remembers some of the little people she met along the way in Vicki's role. So obviously this has been an unprecedented crisis, and it's required an unprecedented response. And we're seeing that at the state and local level among our healthcare providers, our business community, our nonprofits are doing remarkable work in this challenge. Congress has and the president worked together for an unprecedented response, 4 major bipartisan bills, almost $3 trillion of help, everything from accelerating vaccines and tests to helping small businesses and our major employers ride this out, and providing help to our hospitals and our local heroes in this. My role, Ways and Means Committee, has been on the tax relief for businesses and the economic support for families, obviously unemployment issues, and of course healthcare, making sure we're getting reimbursements to our local hospitals, healthcare providers, nursing homes in here. And I think Randy Weber can talk a little more about the PPP and the crucial role that's played for small businesses. But I think this has been a cash flow crisis economically. We tried to inject as much cash into those local businesses and as much tax relief to allow them to ride this out and keep their employees working while they do it. Unfortunately, as you read, for this 5th bill, Speaker Pelosi decided to go it alone, a one-party bill. We didn't get a chance or an invitation to really work together on that. I think that was a mistake. I think we're doing our best work when we do work together. We are still not out of this challenge by any means, and I think both parties have good ideas. So I'm hopeful at some point we could work together sooner rather than later. At the end of the day, I felt like that $3 trillion bill left behind the 36 million Americans who have lost their jobs. I don't think, marijuana banking, early voting, early release of criminals, things like that, they aren't going to help people get back to work. But I do think that we can work together closely on a number of issues. And the other thing I noticed, the bill had no liability reforms. So it really, our hospitals, our healthcare workers, our local businesses, we want to reward them for opening safely to make sure they have a safe workplace for both their employees and their customers. They've already lost so much revenue. I think fighting trial lawyers in courts for frivolous lawsuits will only hurt. And so I think there needs to be just some targeted, reasonable liability reforms. It wasn't in that legislation. Where I do hope we can work together, I think as we keep the focus and pressure on the virus, our top economic priority, regardless of what industry you're in, is getting making sure those 36 million Americans who've lost their jobs temporarily don't lose them permanently. That, I think, is the key to our economic recovery and long-term. Make sure we avoid a prolonged recession. We believe Republicans, and again, would love to work together with our Democrat colleagues, make sure we reopen the economy safely, help businesses rebuild their workforce so they can rebound, and help businesses remake their workplace to make sure it is safe and healthy for the workers and customers. To that end, Ways and Means Committee Republicans have designed a return to work bonus that encourages those who've been laid off, when they get that job offer from their previous employee, to come back to work, and they can keep up to $1,200 of unemployment as they return. That will help reconnect our workers with our local businesses. We've also designed a tax incentive to help businesses defray the costs of reopening, of testing, protective gear, reconfiguring their workplaces, whether they're an office, a restaurant, or a manufacturing plant. We also have a new tax incentive to bring medicines, crucial medicines, medical equipment, ingredients back to the US. One of our lessons learned has been how many of our crucial medical ingredients and supplies are made in unreliable countries like China. Final point, I'm on the President's task force to reopen the economy and do it safely. This is really critical because we know if you are unemployed, and especially long term, we see significant increases in drug and alcohol abuse, domestic violence, crime, and in fact, shorter lifespans. It's really important we find a way to reopen safely. I'm confident we can. Texas is reopening safely. Governor Abbott has been very cautious, but this phased-in approach is working. I noticed that while our cases are up significantly, and I'm going to finish with this, cases are up significantly, it's because we're testing significantly more, especially in the hot spots like prisons, senior centers, and some of the meat processing plants out in West Texas. But here's some key elements. Our infection rate, which most cities want to get below 14%, in Texas, ours is less than 5%. It has dropped dramatically, which means fewer and fewer people are being infected. Our hospitalizations first dropped at the reopening, now have leveled out perfectly here. Lots of area in the hospitalization. Those are good signs. And finally, we've been fortunate. Our death rate per capita in Texas is the best of the 10 top major states. To put it in perspective, in New York, for every death, there are about 870 residents. In Texas, for every death, there's about 23,000 residents. We've been fortunate to be able to keep that fatality rate incredibly low. And I'm confident as we reopen safely, we can continue to do that. But we're going to need your help. Obviously, the real estate industry is so crucial to our local communities and our economy. I really think at the end of the day, getting people back to work, getting customers out there, building consumer confidence, businesses reinvesting again, tackling the energy challenges here in Houston are really going to be key to elevating all industries, including our local realtors. So with that, Mike and Kenya, thank you for having me. I think I got 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to ask a question, again, thanks for making room for me.
I'd like to ask the same question I asked Congressman Crenshaw. What can we do for you?
What can you do? I think realtors are such a bellwether in our community. One, continue to work so closely with us as lawmakers in what you're seeing in the community. I think that's incredibly important for us. We know too, the PPP program was designed for our small businesses, our independent contractors, our self-employed, continue to work on how we make that better. And I was really encouraged to hear that the Secretary Mnuchin's open to more flexibility there. I think that's going to be important to a lot of our small businesses. And then help us, find the right policies to get people back to work. I think that's going to be crucial, especially, when you tie people back to their business. Work is where you get usually the highest salary. Right now, unfortunately, the unemployment benefits are so generous. In some states, up to 75% of the workers get paid more not to work than to work. That's one issue if you're helping people stay home. That becomes a barrier if you're helping them return to work. And so just continue to work with us on the right policies to get the economy moving, and while we keep that pressure on the virus.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Congressman.
much.
And from a long history with the realtors, you will get a lot of input, especially from that FPC you have, which I know is on the call.
Yes.
So thank you, sir. And I will now turn it back over to Kenya.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Congressman Brady, for all that you do. You've been a longtime friend, and with Vicki Fullerton as a good friend, we are grateful and ready to help when you say so.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure now to introduce Congressman Randy Weber. Congressman Randy Weber has represented Texas's 14th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives since 2013 and is a lifelong Houstonian, living in a 20-mile radius for all his life. Prior to being elected to the U.S. House, he served 4 years in the Texas State House of Representatives, where he authored landmark legislation to combat human trafficking. Congressman Weber currently serves on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee and holds the position of chairman of the Energy Subcommittee. He also serves in the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Congressman Randy Weber's FPC is Misty Bacon, and we are beyond proud to have him represent the Space City and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much, Randy Weber. Turning it over to you.
Well, thank you, Kenya. And I have to ask all of y'all on this call, how many of y'all watched Miss Kenya take a drink out of something red and wonder, how does she get Bloody Marys? Where is that brunch going on?
Okay, this is over. We're done. Thank you so much, Congressman Weber.
You know, it's hard to get excited about confession of guilty, isn't it, Kenya?
Thanks.
But I do want to fix one thing she said. Kenya said that I've lived in a 20-mile radius all my life. This isn't all my life. At least I hope it isn't. but so far, look, I'm 66 years old. I'm privileged to have Miss Misty Bacon represent us. She does a great representing me or be on my liaison with y'all, and she does a great job. And Misty, I'll send you an invoice in the bill for that. But she really is delightful. She's knowledgeable. She's a go-getter. She's eager. And Chairman Brady, I still call him Chairman Brady, gave great insight as to where we've been here this last couple of weeks and a little of the background. He talked about PPP, Payment Protection Program. I can tell you that in my district, those 3 coastal counties of Texas, starting at Louisiana, that other foreign country, and going down to Freeport, that's huge for us. Kevin mentioned energy. Kevin mentioned the housing industry. What y'all do, y'all know this for a fact, the housing industry provides more jobs and more things for the economy than most any other industry. Maybe the automobile industry is number 2. But as fate would have it, yesterday I had a chance to review the TARP Act from 2008, 2009, when things were cratering. Many of y'all will remember that. I think Misty was probably in Kenya, and probably Christina were probably still in grade school back then. But, and so with that backdrop, how important it is for us now that we get that help out. Government has mandated that businesses shut down. I want to put a little bit of a perspective on it from my viewpoint, if I can. Why is it important that we reopen? Not only do we need to get businesses back going, you know, not only do we need to get the help out to those businesses, and it doesn't need to be partisan per se, like Kevin talked about. I want to read you something for those of you who don't follow me on Facebook. Yesterday, actually it was Monday, on this day in 1982, Ronald Reagan had this quote. He said, "Our national character is based on a common identity with a single ideal, a shared value that overcomes our differences and unites us as people." A national character based on a common ideal. And what is that? That is the American dream. The freedom that comes through and with the American dream. Isn't that the major most part of that? Isn't it owning your own home? Being responsible for what you do and raising a family and living that American dream? Of course it is, in my opinion. I think y'all would agree. So it's extremely important that we get this done. We wish Nancy Pelosi would have done a little bit different on the bill, as Kevin said. The Senate has already said it's dead on arrival. So rather than go back and forth trying to negotiate this stuff, why don't we work on getting the economy back while keeping our citizens safe, health-wise, and economically? So the Payment Protection Program, I could give you statistics from my district, District 14 in Texas, where I'd have to go back and look them up. We've gotten so much input. It's been working well. We were hoping that this next bill would work as well, if not better. And so we're a little disappointed that there's a holdup here. But we need to all come together on this and get back in gear. I'm astounded to hear the statistics that Chairman Brady put on Texas having a death for every, what was it, 24,000 versus 900 in New York or something like that. So Texas is in good shape. We believe that Texas is the strongest energy point in America. Of course, our district, Houston area, as Kenya talked about, Gulf Coast, my 5 ports that I get the privilege of representing, we produce 65% of the nation's jet fuel. We are the energy hub of not only Texas, but of the country, in my opinion. So we need to get back to fixing the oil industry. You know, that's going to have a huge impact on the housing industry. We need to get back to making sure our country does get the businesses get back open again. Many of you know I was an air conditioning contractor, owned my own company for 35 years. Sold it, 3 years ago this coming July. So I understand what's at stake from a small business, perspective. Of course, I served 4 years in the Texas House, as Kenya talked about. I've been up here, it's hard to believe, 7 years. And here's a little bit of perspective that y'all may not have thought about. I think about it from time to time. I got elected to Congress. I got demoted to Congress, I should say, from the Texas House on November the 6th, 2012. Now that was my and my beautiful bride's 36th wedding anniversary. So we knew we were going to celebrate that night, win, lose, or draw. When I came into the United States House of Representatives, there was 25 Republicans and 11 Democrats in the Texas 36 congressional seats. Randy Weber was number 25 in seniority when I came into the U.S. House on the Republican side. After this session, I'm going to be number 8 in seniority. That's how much turnover has happened. So we need a lot of help. We need our Republicans and our Democrats to stand up together. Remember what Reagan said, we are a common nation with a common ideal, common nationality. And I know that y'all get that. I know that y'all get the business aspect of that. I know that y'all get the American dream and what's at stake here. And as Kevin said, we look forward to y'all's input. And I too look forward to being back over at Tortilla Coast, standing up on those stairs there. And, maybe enjoying a quick breakfast bite with y'all and some coffee. Getting to hear Al Green and Brian Babban and all of our colleagues. So thank you for the call today. Unfortunately, I've got to go too. I've got another one I've got to pick up on. But before I do, I'll turn it over for any questions, Miss Kenya.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing that wonderful sense of humor with you this morning as well. All joking aside, we do appreciate all that you're doing right now to support us and to support the region. And you hit some very key points there about how important and influential what we do is to the economy. I'm going to check to see if there are any questions. But more importantly, we've asked the other members of Congress and would like to ask you as well, what can we do to continue to support your efforts and make sure that we're doing all that we can to assist you as you serve us?
Well, you're doing it, Kenya. It's kind of what I mentioned earlier. I'm a great fan of Ronald Reagan and the freedom he believed in, free enterprise, freedom, less government interference, less taxes, smaller government. And y'all get that because that has a direct impact on business. And since the housing industry is such a huge part of that American dream that I talked about, such a huge part of our industry, that should be our primary focus. So when y'all come to us, you say, look, here's something that we want to make y'all aware of. Here's the pros and cons. It's big for us because as y'all know, we deal with, my goodness, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different issues and concepts. So it's good to have people on the ground, especially in Texas. I get it. I'm prejudiced. I think, Texas is hard to beat, especially in Texas, but we love the fact that y'all bring that to us. You're invested, you know what's at stake. You can spread that out in the community without being partisan at all. You can tell people how important that is. You meet people on the ground. You see the hope in their eyes. I have to believe, especially, I dealt with this in the air conditioning business. Some young couple that's in their first home and they call and they've got a problem with their air conditioner. They're scared to death it's going to be a compressor or a whole new system and get to go fix it. I remember back in '83, right after I'd started, fixing one for $88 for a little lady, and she just couldn't believe it. She was so happy. Y'all get to see that every day. And what's happening now with the coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, has a dulling effect right now on our market. But in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger, we will be back. Y'all are going to help do that. because of y'all, that'll happen. And we appreciate that, Kenya.
Absolutely. And to take those words again, we will be back, and we'll be back to Tortilla Coast, and can't wait to see you then. And for the record, let me just clear this up. This is what was in my drink. It is a vitamin drink this morning. I wish it were a Bloody Mary, but you know, the HAR staff really wouldn't like that too much. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
Good luck, y'all.
Thank you. Next on our agenda this morning, we are going to visit with Lizzie Fletcher's office. Is Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher on the line?
We don't have her quite yet, Kenya.
Okay.
Should be on in about 1 minute or so.
Well, if that is the case, I'd like to introduce a guest. I'm going to take a little chairman privilege here to introduce someone. You all know that for many years, my mini-me has always been on these trips to Washington, D.C. So this year, my mini-me would like to say hello. Hello to everyone. And she misses being in D.C. at Tortilla Coast this morning as well, but say hi, Kate. And hi. This year, we're a little more casual than norm, but she just wanted to pop in and say hello. All right. All righty, bye.
Love her.
Okay. Looks like we're getting ready for Congressman Fletcher's office. Send those questions in to us as well. As we are waiting, we'd love to be able to say, to share some questions that you have. Oh, I see a hello, Kate, from Bob Hale. So Bob, your friend misses you, and she misses everyone at Tortilla Coast. And she was business on top and sleepy time on bottom today. This would never happen in Washington, D.C. All right, so it looks like we have 2 members of Congress that will be joining us soon. If we could cue it to you, Christina, I think we have some a visual that we can share with the team as we wait for our members to join us. Oh, it looks like we have Congresswoman Fletcher here. Forgive me. Hello, I apologize for the delay there. Okay. At this time, I would like to introduce Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher. Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher has lived in Houston and Congressional District 7 nearly all her life. She is a graduate of Kenyon College in Ohio, where she earned highest honor in history and was elected to Phi Beta Kappa. Prior to her election in 2018, she worked as a lawyer on a number of different matters. First with an international law firm headquartered in Houston, and later at a boutique litigation firm where she became its first woman partner. Congresswoman Fletcher served on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure and House Science and Space and Technology Committee. Congresswoman Fletcher's FPC is Maryland Art, and we could not be more proud of the work that Maryland is doing with the Congresswoman, and we welcome you to our session today.
Thank you so much, Kenya. I'm delighted to be with all of you this morning from my home office. And I'm sorry, of course, that we're not meeting in person at Tortilla Coast, although I can also say that, that I've been home during most of this pandemic, and my access to good quality Tex-Mex has been much higher here at home, especially in the district. So that is one of the pluses of being home. But I am, of course, like everyone here, working primarily in response to COVID-19 and to how it's affecting our community. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing also from you all and answering questions, a couple of questions as well. I have had a wonderful liaison in Maryland. She's been terrific. I love those reports that I get on the district. I mean, it's such great data. And I always tell y'all, for anyone who's new and hasn't heard me say it before, my pastime, leisure time, de-stress activity is to look on my HAR app at real estate. And so I very much am excited to get a chance to visit with y'all this morning virtually. It isn't the same as being in person, but I know that we are all adjusting and learning how to kind of live in this new moment, and doing all the work I can to make sure that we get through this time successfully. And I think we are seeing now really how important it is that our government work in all the different ways it can on all the things we can and work together as partners. And so really just a quick update on what I'm doing, and I'll talk briefly about COVID and then other things that I think really matter in my district and across our community. Of course, in response to COVID-19, I'm sure you've probably heard from some of the other folks this morning and have been following very closely the work we've done in Congress with 3 major bills to respond to the pandemic, whether they're all generally appropriations and funding, but there's a lot of detail there. And of course, the efforts to help small businesses has been a huge issue in my district. Probably of the calls we get a whole lot of calls about health concerns. We get a lot of calls. Oh, great. There's my district up on the screen so you can see it. We get a lot of calls about small business concerns and health concerns. And so we've been working hard to address those. I have 2 members of my staff who are working almost all the time in helping people with their SBA loans and loan applications, and have been for the last several weeks. I would also mention, as I'm sure you all know, if you look at the map and you see where the district is, I start just inside the loop, run all the way west to Katy, north to Jersey Village and Cypress, down to Meyerland and Bel Air. So there's real diversity within the district in terms of both the activities, the business community. I've got the Galleria, and I've got the energy corridor. And so I've been very focused in the impacts of COVID-19 on the energy industry, as I'm sure all of you are, and have brought several pieces of legislation to try to ensure that the things that we can do at a congressional level are being done. And I've talked with small business owners and large business owners throughout the district, and I think that we are really experiencing kind of multiple impacts of COVID-19 and seeing what's happening in our economy. And I'm sure that y'all are seeing that as well. And so that's been a real key focus. But, you know, I think what we're seeing is that COVID-19 is impacting all of us in profound ways and in ways we didn't expect. And it matters to everyone that we work together to get it right. So I've been supportive of all of the legislation. The first big bills were bipartisan bills that I'm sure you have followed. And now I did support the HEROES Act, which has additional funding, especially for state and local governments for things that are critically important, as well as for testing, which is so important to sort of finding a new normal. So I think that what we have seen here is how we need to kind of manage these things together. And I think we're getting back to a point where we're managing the crisis, but we are also focused on some of the work we've been doing before. And so there are a couple of key things for my district. Looking at the map, you can probably tell I have the Barker Reservoir in my district, and a lot of the Addicks Reservoir and upstream housing north of Addicks. And so I asked to serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and I asked to serve on the subcommittee that oversees the Army Corps of Engineers so that I could work very closely on flood mitigation projects and on the impacts throughout my district and of course across our region. So I just had a call last week with the new commander of the Galveston Division, Colonel Vale, talking about the Buffalo Bioresiliency Study, the work that's being done on Project Braze and existing projects, and the work on the dams, and really making sure that we don't lose sight of some of these critical things that were also important to how we live in our community and what our future looks like. And so that's really been a big focus for me. We also, on our committee, are working on the project to widen the Port of Houston. And I'm very optimistic that we will put out a bill this month on the Water Resources Development Act, and that will be a huge economic boon for Houston and really our region, the state of Texas, and of course I would argue the entire country because of the volume that moves through the port. So we've been able to do some really important things on that committee. And I also serve on a couple of other subcommittees there, and it's all related to kind of the things that matter in our district. I'm also on the science committee, as some of you know from hearing me say that before, and that's where we really have a lot of focus on energy issues, as well as on some of these environment issues, and especially dealing with weather, with hurricanes and mitigation and planning. I serve on the environment subcommittee and on the I'm the chair of the energy subcommittee, and so we have been looking and talking about kind of our energy future. And to me, it is absolutely critical that Texas's 7th Congressional District be the leading voice on what's happening. And for those of you, kind of looking at the map, you'll know I've got BP headquarters, ConocoPhillips, Shell is right outside, Citgo. There's so many leaders in all aspects of the energy business, as well as wind energy providers and solar providers. And Texas is in all of the above state. And so we're really trying to talk in our energy subcommittee about what that future looks like and incorporate the voices of the people here that I get to represent, who are working on this all day, every day, who have been and who will continue to deliver energy, not just to our community and our country, but really around the globe. And so those have been kind of the principal areas of focus where I've been working. And those are some of the things that we'll continue to do. We are working on appropriations bills as well, and we expect that to go forward this summer. And so I think we in Congress, just like you, are kind of learning how to adjust, how to work a little bit more remotely. Like I said, I'm in my home office this morning. I suspect for everyone on here who's doing residential real estate, for people who are looking, you're probably more people want home offices now. So I'm very glad that we managed to figure this out early. But we are seeing, I think, at least from where I sit, we are seeing a lot of uncertainty. And I think that that's tough in any industry. And I'm sure it's tough for you all, both on the residential side and on the commercial side, and for everybody who's dealing with big picture questions about how is life going to change? Are people going to need as much commercial space? Are we going to have the same footprints? Are people going to be going to work 5 days a week in a cubicle, or are we going to figure out that more people can work from home, right? It affects commercial and residential. And those are some of the questions that we've been talking about. We've also been talking about the impacts of COVID-19 and some of the challenges that we face in terms of certain policies that I think are right in line with some of the things that certainly as a national organization and locally that I think are of interest to you, whether it's dealing with the salt tax. That has been an important part of our discussions. Many of you may know there was a vote to repeal the salt tax in the House at the end of December. So obviously it has to go through the process in the Senate, but certainly that is something that we've been talking about as we see the impacts. There are obviously questions about property taxes and the funding for state and local governments over the next months and years as we're seeing decreased revenues in the sales tax side and anticipating what's going to happen with property taxes. So I think that what we're talking about at the federal level is really the role the federal government can play in helping cities, counties, other municipalities that have some of these crunches. How can we be of assistance? What are programs, sort of things we can do? City of Houston has to have a balanced budget. Obviously, we all know the United States Congress does not. I know some people would like that. Some people don't support it, but we are in a position to help in terms of providing direct assistance to the cities and counties and local governments so that we can continue to see the services, police, fire, trash, going forward. And so that is kind of the crux of what you're seeing in the debate right now. But there's so much where I feel like there's been wide bipartisan agreement through the CARES Act and the other bills that we did to really make sure that we are trying to help in all the ways that we can, and helping with small businesses, and just in making sure that we are listening to constituents. So the kind of update on what I'm doing is hearing from folks, working with them both on small business loans. Unfortunately, in my district, we're getting a lot of calls about unemployment. And so we're watching those changes, and we're seeing where we can provide the most help. So that's a little bit of a quick summary of kind of the state of things today. But I'm happy to answer questions, Kenya, or whatever's kind of most convenient. But I really am glad to be with you all this morning and very much look forward to continuing our conversations.
Thank you so much. And we're honored to have you. You are busy, clearly busy. And just the geographical area that you cover is not only large, but the responsibilities of taking care of an area that large are daunting, I'm sure. I do want to take just a moment for personal privilege to say thank you to you and your team. Your Constituency Services Director, Claudia Morales, because of an introduction by Marilyn Arndt, was able to help me personally with COVID-19. My niece is studying at university in South Korea, and when the pandemic hit initially, there were a lot of concerns that our family had, and she was able to get us in touch with someone in South Korea and really put an ease to our family's mind. So I want to thank you. My sister is a resident in your district, and your team was absolutely amazing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear it. And yeah, it's not a competition with my peers, but I really feel like we just have an incredible team of really dedicated public servants that want to help. And I'm so glad we were able to help you. That is one of the things I didn't even mention, but we've had a lot of people that were out of the country that we helped get back to the United States, or at least, get information if they wanted to stay where they were. And I think it goes to show how this pandemic has affected us in so many ways we didn't even anticipate back in January and February, the kinds of things we would be doing. But that's probably the one thing I would want to add. One of the things I've been doing since I've been in office is really trying to get the word out about the fact that I have these incredible people who are right here in Houston, and wonderful people in Washington too, who are here to help. And so I'm so glad that you had a good experience, that your family had a good experience, and that really is what we are here for. So I'm just delighted to hear that, and grateful for your mentioning it.
Thank you. What can we do to continue to support you and the hard work that you and your team are doing in the district?
Well, I mean, Marilyn is fabulous. And also, I have a lot of friends who are realtors. And so, I feel like realtors know what's going on the ground. And so keeping that information coming, what are you seeing? I talked to one of my realtor friends the other day, and I was saying, well, gosh, I guess it's really, is it just slow? We've been wondering what's happening. And he said, oh my gosh, it's really picked up. And we were talking about all sorts of things. Things are crazy in Galveston, just trying to get a perspective. And I think, y'all know what people are thinking about, what they're worried about, whether they have kind of confidence, whether they feel safe. I know that there are virtual open houses and things happening, but I also know people are starting to engage in person again. And so I think the dialogue and the information that I get back from the folks in your organization has been just wonderful. And so continuing to let us know what you're hearing, what the word on the street is. I feel like the best way for me to do my job, which is of course both a job title and a job description to be a representative, is to know what's happening. And so having that direct connection, getting the feedback in real time is incredibly valuable, because I do think, in my experience, like I said, people don't think to call me necessarily for constituent services until I tell them, hey, we can help with, everything from passports to, immigration questions to problems with the IRS, right? And it sort of turns on a light bulb for people. And so I think that for me, being able to hear what's happening, and kind of, people don't always think to call me just to tell me what's going on, right? They might call with a problem, or they might call because they've heard there's some bill and they want to register support or disagreement with it. But people don't always call just to tell me how things are going. And so I really rely on this network of partners to understand what people are facing and the issues that they're raising with you. And I think you deal with, the most personal needs, whether everyone's coming and saying, I need a home office now, and we're getting a sense that people will be, living differently, or whether people are very concerned about, people want to move because the interest rates are great, or people want to know, people feel so much job insecurity that they want to stay where they are, and they're worried about what's happening. And so I think that the collective knowledge of this organization is incredibly valuable, and I've appreciated it so far, and really look forward to just continuing that conversation and staying in very close touch, so that I can know the things I need to know to be able to do my job. And I'm really grateful to all of you for all you have done already and are doing.
Thank you so much. You couldn't have a better advocate than Marilyn Arndt. Thank you so much for your service and all that you do. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much. Great to see you. Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Turning it back over to you, Mike.
Mike, you seem to be muted.
Just in case Mike is running.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. Congressman Brian Babban is a lifelong resident of East Texas, growing up in Beaumont. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science from Lamar University and completed dental school at the University of Texas Dental Branch in Houston, Texas. Dr. Babban served as an airborne artilleryman in the Texas Army National Guard and the U.S. Army Reserve, holding numerous jobs to put himself through school. After being elected to Congress, he was appointed to serve on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Congressman Brian Babban's FPC is Jeannie Turk. HAR welcomes Congressman Brian Babban.
Thank you. Can you see me, Mike?
Yes, sir.
Okay, couldn't see my own image. I just see you. All right, thank you. It's so great to be with you and all of your, all the HAR good folks. And by the way, Jeannie Turk, I hope she's on as well. She and I go back a long way in politics, and appreciate her. She's one of my best friends who's a realtor, and I come from a realty family. My mother, my grandmother, my grandfather, my uncle, I have a brother, all in the real estate business. So anyway, just want to say good morning. Great to be with you with HAR, and I appreciate the invitation to give you an update on the federal government's response to COVID-19. Unfortunately, instead of meeting in person like we normally do in DC, these types of calls and video chats have become the new normal, if you will, for me and for many of us at this point in time. I'm very pleased to see that Governor Abbott is moving forward in opening the state back up. It's time. I hear from my constituents overwhelmingly ready to open back up. Of course, as a healthcare provider for many, many years, we have to do this in a very careful manner, but we will. But we cannot stay locked down forever. It's time to open up. We need to be safe and practice our common sense measures, but our economy absolutely needs to open. People are suffering. They desperately need to work, and they need the income. Jeannie, I've mentioned you, and she and I talk frequently. We appreciate her input and HAR's input for the very important aspect of real estate. Real estate provides around 10 million jobs in our economy, and it's a driver of our economy. There's no question about that. If we don't have a viable, working real estate, affordable real estate market, I represent more petrochemical refining facilities and plants and manufacturing facilities than any other district in the country, and also represent 4 ports. I have an enormous amount of infrastructure and transportation modes that are so very important, and none of this could take place without a workforce that had a viable real estate market and affordable. And that's why it's so important that we have storm surge protection. We need really a long-term national flood insurance program, and we're hoping that that will happen sometime in the near future. Want to say how much I have enjoyed. I can't say I've enjoyed it, but it's been an interesting part of my life, I think, and everybody else's. I've never experienced anything like this lockdown for a pandemic, but it's something that's probably new for everyone. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done. We've passed a number of bills I was proud to vote for, notably the CARES Act, which was a $2.2 trillion bill that had some features in there that absolutely are benefiting folks in the real estate business. Our new numbers from Small Business Administration show that the PPP, or Paycheck Protection Program, is providing very critical support to millions of small businesses and tens of millions of working Americans. Round one of PPP had nearly 135 approved applications, totaling $28.5 billion in funding, and round two began on April the 27th with over 4.3 million loans, totaling $513 billion. The average size loan, a lot of folks thought it was just going to large businesses and people that may not have needed it. But we know from the data that the average size loan is $118,000. And according to Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and SBA Administrator Carranza, this program has now processed more than $500 billion with a T dollars in economic support. And then also, as you know, the CARES Act provided the opportunity for applicants to request an emergency advance of not more than $10,000 within 3 days of that application. And these are called economic injury disaster loans, or EIDL loans. And they're structured on a per employee basis from $1,000 up to $10,000. There have been 252,000 EIDL loans levied out with over 24 billion going out to small businesses. And as we know, having been a small businessman myself, practicing dentistry for 36 years, small businesses are absolutely the backbone of our economy. We certainly appreciate the Walmarts and the Amazons and the General Electrics and so on and so forth, but the backbone of our economy, most people work for a small business. The House has just passed a $3 trillion package this past week when all of us went back up to vote on. And I couldn't see voting for that. The reason I couldn't vote for that was because a lot of those provisions in that package absolutely did not have anything to do with COVID-19. And I'm sure this was I think we had one Republican vote for it. The rest of us voted against it. We had I think there were 13 or 14 Democrats that voted against it, and most of them voted for it. It did pass, but there were some provisions in there that I felt like just did not address the COVID-19. It seemed to, for instance, there were some election provisions in there. It was federalizing really a state function, in my opinion. So I couldn't see voting for it. I think the people are expecting the Congress to have bipartisan support for them while they're forced into a lockdown. This is a self-imposed recession that we put ourselves in. Within just a matter of a few weeks, incredibly, we have gone from the best economy with the lowest unemployment rate and the greatest prosperity that we've seen in probably 5 or 6 decades. And then in a matter of weeks, we're in a very, very deep recession. And we absolutely have got to restart this economy. And this is what the CARES Act was all about, standing up these small businesses, helping distressed industries like the airlines, and our ports, our healthcare providers, our small businesses, on and on. And I've read some of the literature that HAR has put out, and you're thanking Congress for some of these provisions. And I would say you're welcome, because we definitely need it. I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure as well. I mentioned that earlier. And it's not likely that a large infrastructure-related funding package will be included in any upcoming economic stimulus bill. It's not looking promising. However, serving on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I'm continuing to advocate for the immense need of infrastructure in my district and in our region, our entire region of Southeast Texas. And some of you may not realize, but my district runs from Southeast Harris County, from Houston, if you will, all the way to Orange on the Louisiana line, and then up to Jasper, Newton, Tyler, and Livingston and Polk County. And it's a very large district. And we absolutely have got infrastructure-related funding needs, our entire district, but especially in the Houston area. As I said, I represent 4 ports, and I'm advocating for a number of projects in Houston. Number one, I shouldn't say number one, but one of my priority items is replacing the Interstate 10 bridge over the San Jacinto River, which is in my district just outside of Baytown, which has caused significant traffic delays for quite a long while. We had a barge strike, and that is not the first time that has happened, which delayed traffic going east to west or west to east. It is now open again, thank goodness, but we need to enlarge and expand that bridge because it is definitely a choke point and a bottleneck for transportation. And despite this infrastructure package stalemate in the House and Senate, we're still working on reauthorizing what we call the WRDA bill, the Water Resources Development Act. And we're expecting to see a draft of that bill next month. I've been on a number of conference calls on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that I serve on, and we're working on that as we speak. My number one priority as far as a WRDA bill project is absolutely the Port of Houston and the Houston Ship Channel and the widening and deepening project. It is one of the busiest waterways in the United States. It's used by thousands of businesses in Baytown and across our region. The Army Corps of Engineers recently came out with what they call their Chief's Report, which culminates a 4-year, $10 million study conducted by the Corps of Engineers and the Port of Houston to identify needed channel improvements. This determines the economic value to the nation, satisfies environmental requirements, and it is a major step absolutely in the right direction. We're working extremely hard to make that come to fruition. This is a key element of keeping a viable a key element of this is keeping a viable real estate market, as I said earlier in our talk, to keep our workforce going. As we saw after Hurricane Harvey, we had a shutdown of the channel, a shutdown of the port. We saw a huge spiking prices for fuel, for gasoline around the country. And so that it tells you just how important the transportation is down here in Southeast Texas with all our petrochemical refining facilities, the ports, and all the modes of transportation. So things in this country seem to be changing daily, but the importance of staying connected is very, very critical, and that's why I think calls like this are so extremely valuable. And I want to ask you to please continue to keep our team and me updated on the business of real estate and what HAR's wants and needs are, the critical things that are necessary for our economy to get back up and rolling again. And that's why I think it's so important. Please let us know how we can support you. I want to thank every one of you, and if I can answer any questions, please do so. So I'll just yield back, and thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Congressman, I'll ask you the same question. Is there anything we can do for you other than just keeping in contact?
You know, keeping in contact is having, as I said, I've got a little history in real estate with a mother and grandparents, brothers, and so on, but and for many friends. But knowing exactly what your needs and wants are, because sometimes we may not be aware of that. And that's why it's so important for people like you and Jeannie Turk and people like that to reach out to us and tell us exactly what it is that's so critical for you. Because I know some of the parts of the CARES Act. Helping small businesses. At first, that wasn't happening. Tax credits, $50 billion going to to small companies who retain their employees. These are all things that I know help the real estate market. So, Mike, please just tell us what's going on. Keep us posted, and if we need legislation, I really want and need the input of people, organizations and associations like HAR to help us write meaningful bills and legislation to keep our economy going.
Well, we will do so, sir. We know Jeannie and all of HAR and our different advisory groups. We are not shy. We will absolutely let you know when we need something or have some input to give. So, okay.
Absolutely, Mike.
Well, I thank you, sir, and you have a great day. And hopefully, one of these days you'll get back to DC. So,
well, you know what? We're supposed to go back at the end of this week and vote on
yeah.
a very important item, and that is the reauthorization of the FISA
Right.
warrant system, which has been in the news so very prevalently in the last few years. And I'm looking forward to getting back up there and getting into a discussion about that very important issue.
Well, good. Thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you, Mike. God bless.
Thank you, sir. We are going to move on. We are still waiting to see if we can get one more congressperson on in a second. And so right now, I would like to move to another agenda item, and we would like to recognize, take a moment to recognize our RPAC Hall of Fame inductees from Houston for this year. Since we don't get to go to DC, we want to recognize those. At the $25,000 level, we have Nancy First, Becky Hill, and our very own Karen Driscoll. Yay! And at the $50,000 level, we've got Mark Woodruff. We'd also like to recognize all of the HAR's 30 members of the RPAC Hall of Fame. Look at that, Vicki. Look how great you are. Sitting way up there on top. So these are our 30 members of HAR that have taken the time and effort to make sure that they give back to the industry that has given us so much, and we really appreciate their hard work. And we wish we could see all these guys up in DC walking across that stage. That's the cool part. So anyway, I'm going to turn it back over to Kenya now, and we'll take it from there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Mike. And I was remiss in not thanking Congressman Babban for always bringing Roxanne to the Tortilla Coast. You know, I think there have been a few times where Roxanne has stood in for him, and when he came back, we didn't want her to leave the stage. So if he's still on the line, please send our regards to Roxanne. She's lovely. And it's also great to know that you have such a strong legacy in real estate with your family. And hats off to Jeannie. Jeannie Turk is just amazing, and she does a great job of keeping him informed and keeping us aware as well. So thank you. And congratulations to all of the RPAC Hall of Fame members. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It will be, excuse me, it will be a big celebration next year.
Yeah, more of that, what's that? You okay over there?
I am. This is just green tea, if anybody's asking. Just green tea.
Okay.
We are working on getting one more congressperson on speaker if we can really quick. We were having technical difficulties getting her on the Zoom. So Mike, Kenya, if you have anything that you want to share personally or share with our members, we have about 90 members on with us this morning, so that's really exciting.
That's good. Okay,
yeah.
I actually have a question for the participants. I know that HAR has been doing a whole lot of Zoom meetings, and a lot of classes are moving to Zoom, and a lot of this entire event, all the NAR legislative meetings and board meetings and everything went virtual this year. And so far, from all of them and most of our advisory group meetings that we've had we are seeing more people attending on virtual than we are in person. And I'm just curious if anybody that out there, because we've got a really good group of involved realtors in this meeting. What's your opinion of that? Going forward, do we want to maybe do both, or do we want to go back to just live and see what we get? So just make some comments in the panelist and in the comment section, and we'll get the message out and see what we can come up with to see if you guys like that kind of idea. Okay, yes. I'm gonna turn it back over. Kenya, turn it back over to you.
To the comments. We do have Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on speakerphone. So if you wanted to go ahead and read her bio.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Congresswoman Jackson Lee. Just a little bit of information about Sheila Jackson Lee. She is serving her 11th term as a member of the United States House of Representatives, where she represents the 18th Congressional District of Texas. She is a senior member of the House Committee on the Judiciary and Homeland Security and a newly appointed member of the Budget Committee. She has passed groundbreaking legislation on criminal justice reform and been a champion for women and children throughout her time in Congress. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee earned a BA in political science from Yale University with honors in the first graduating class that included females, and went on to earn a law degree from the University of Virginia Law School. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's FPC is Gerald Womack, and we welcome you today by phone. We wish we were seeing you in person, but welcome nonetheless.
Well, thank you so very much. Good morning to John Nugent and Bob Hale. Thank you so very much for your leadership. Amber, thank you so very much for your courtesies. And of course, Gerald Womack, we're delighted. In COVID-19, we wish we could do a lot of things, but we are under unusual circumstances. And so making and creating opportunities to engage, whether it's a visual and or audio, I think is a very important part of continuing civic life and providing information. So I'm delighted to provide information, which would include the fact that I'm in my 13th term. Thank you so very much, and serve as the Chief Deputy Whip, and also serve as the founder and chair of the bipartisan Congressional Coronavirus Task Force. I was the first member that brought, at least to their district, the recognition of the potential for the COVID-19 pandemic. And I say that not with any self-promotion, but it was on February the 10th that I had my first press conference dealing with preparedness as a senior member of Homeland Security for COVID-19 at the airport, when I questioned the federal agencies, CBP, TSA, as to whether or not they were prepared for the traveling public. And it was obvious that they were not prepared. It was also obvious that there was a downplay that this was not going to reach the United States. In a subsequent hearing that I participated in Homeland Security, I secured for a vice admiral with the NIH that the United States was aware or first got knowledge of COVID-19 in November 2019. So clearly the preparedness that should have gone ahead of the first cases coming into the United States was not there. I proceeded to seek more information on COVID-19 with a letter to the chair, ranking member of Homeland Security, to begin hearings on this question. And then on March 19th, 2020, I really believe that we opened here in Houston with my partnership with UMMC, the first testing site, coronavirus testing site that did not require anyone to have symptoms. We did screen and ask people whether they'd been out of the country, whether or not they had temperatures, cough, and could not breathe. Obviously, if you cannot breathe, you needed to seek medical help. But I laid that groundwork to simply say that it is really a question of learning to be prepared. And I think this country has been so blessed to be able to overcome any number of significant and historic events, particularly dealing with natural disasters, that we did not take the COVID-19 in the manner that we should have. And the difference between an area having a tornado, an area having a drastic flooding, or an area having a Hurricane Harvey is that other parts of the generosity of the nation can stand up and help those areas. In the instance of COVID-19, as many of you see, it is a national and international pandemic. It's the most courageous, the most contagious, not courageous, contagious virus that we've ever had. We do not have a cure, and we're still working on a vaccine. By the way, we're very gratified to know that a number of the vaccine research and clinicals are being done right here in the Texas Medical Center, and particularly with a number of our very, how should I say it, very well-renowned doctors. And I've been working with a Dr. Hortez at Baylor College of Medicine, and I believe that we are as competitive as any other part of the country in trying to assess the vaccine. Since that time, I've been doing testing sites. I've opened 7 and also been an advocate in Washington for increasing testing sites. I hope those of you there have taken advantage of the testing sites. We've opened 7 in a public-private structure, and then, of course, advocated through CARES 1 for testing dollars that allowed the city and the county to open up, in particular, Butler Stadium and Del Mar. Since that time, we put $25 billion in the interim financing bill that was passed on April 23rd, and now $75 billion in CARES 2. And that is to be able to open and to provide the state and the local governments with testing resources to be able to test hotspots, to be able to test rural Texas. Texas had been second and third last in terms of its testing capacity and its testing commitment. We hope with these new dollars that it will improve. Hotspots have been discovered, as you well know, in the meatpacking areas, but frankly, having gotten calls.
Excuse me, Congresswoman?
Yes. Hello?
It appears that we're having some technical difficulties with hearing you right now. I don't know if you're in an area where the reception may be clearer in other areas that you're in. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, I can hear you very clearly. So you can't hear me now?
No, there's just some interference with the call. But that's okay. We're going to wrap up in just a moment because of the technical difficulties. If you'd like to continue, and then we're going to move on to some questions if you would be willing to answer some.
Oh, so anyhow, we've been getting calls from around the state to promote testing. Let me conclude by saying I want to be able to speak to the HEROES bill that I think is guided by science and guided by the leaders in the financial world, which include the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which indicated that Congress should go big. This is going to be a long-standing engagement, if you will, in trying to address COVID-19, particularly as we go into the fall, where there is a suggestion of a combination of flu and COVID-19. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you're fine.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And so let me just pick out certain aspects and really try to focus your mind not on the $3 trillion, which it is a lot, but be very clear. This is a phenomenon that historically we have never faced, except maybe the Spanish flu of the early 1900s, and even the Depression. This far exceeds that. The Spanish flu, in terms of its recurrence and the loss ultimately of huge numbers of Americans. But this is a situation where the most powerful nation in the world is facing a large mountain to climb. We have been a leader in the free world. We need to maintain that position in all aspects. To do so, the world is watching what we do for not only our own, but what we do for the world. And there's certainly been some cracks in our armor in what we have done or not done for the world and for the nation. So listening to many of you and listening to our local governments and state governments, there's about $700 billion in this to be able to replace lost revenues in both state and local governments that include cities and counties. As you well know, the mayor has indicated there will be $169 million budget deficit in the city of Houston to no fault of their own. And they need that kind of supplemental dollars to help for the loss of revenue, closing the rodeo, closing the energy conference in May and the World Petroleum Institute that we worked so hard to get on. So we're providing monies for that. We're providing monies, again, recognizing the crisis of rental issues that we're facing in these communities. 90 minutes and all of the $15 million was gone last week. And I'm sure it will be gone, the monies that the county has put forward. So we're putting forward $175 billion for rental assistance and mortgage payments, recognizing that people who have ownership of apartment buildings and others also have a sense of crisis. But if we provide the renters so that they can pay and have homeowners not be able to lose their homes. Food insecurity, you see the lines that people are engaging in to get food, and these are, since I've been in many of those lines giving out food, these are people that have never had to ask for anything in their life. This is a very real pandemic. We've extended unemployment benefits, $600 extra, an extra 13 weeks, and we will not run out of those dollars. The PPP has been working very effectively, maybe, and to allow people to keep their employees. There are some challenges about entities that took the dollars that really could be out on the open capital markets. Many people have seen that the stock market has had its ups and downs, but it is basically stable because of the infusion of dollars. Finally, if you infuse dollars into the economy, into those who are consumers of which this economy turns on, then you will find, I think, some continued stabilization. We've also provided dollars for our schools as they make very important decisions about opening, both from the primary and secondary to higher education. Obviously, you've seen there's been a higher need for online learning, and that is extremely important. And in that online learning, that means that impoverished communities, neighborhoods, families without access to the internet, that's been unfolding. And then, of course, not access to laptops, that's unfolding as well. One of the things that we found is that tragically, as we face the pandemic, all of us, that some of the inadequacies in our society have become glaring. Poverty have been one of the greatest obstacles for people being able to survive in this moment. And so we have to work on that to make America continue to be the leading nation that it is. I think it has always been great, and people look to us for our greatness, our values, our volunteer spirit. I've introduced a lot of legislation dealing with medical professionals, protecting the elderly during this time, dealing with technology, and will continue to do so, and will continue to be open, have an open door to all of you. As I say that, let me say that it is also difficult for those of us who are not focusing on fundraising and being out in the community, working and answering the concerns not only of our impoverished neighbors and friends and constituents, but as well local government. I worked with the city to fight for the direct payments to the city and county government, and as well to bolster up the $700 billion for state and local government. I worked with the state on ensuring that they had testing dollars and more PPEs, which were the medical equipment. So in this instance, support from organizations like yours is crucial, particularly in my 25-year record of supporting the realtors. 25 years as a member of the United States Congress, and before that, as a member of the Houston City Council. So I would hope that you would encourage your PAC in Washington to provide me with a major and the ultimate donation. I would hope that my years of service would be worthy of that. And I ask that in the humblest of spirit. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And my apologies, those tech difficulties were on my end, not yours, Congresswoman. Forgive me. Thank you so much for sharing all that you're doing during this COVID-19 pandemic. You know, if you turn on the local news, we see you. We see you out there giving to the community and being a part of the solution. And we appreciate you for that, in addition to all of the other work that you were doing for us. So thank you for a long time commitment to service and to helping others. We're going to open it up, and let me ask if there are any questions on the chat box for us. While we're checking for questions right now, what can we do to continue to support you, Congresswoman, in your efforts? We did hear your ask about the PAC. Appreciate that. But like to know, is there anything else we can do from a grassroots level opportunity to help?
Well, I think you need to take a very serious look at the HEROES Act. We passed it out of the House of Representatives. If I can explain how that worked. The last bill that we passed on April 23rd was a bill that was written by the United States Senate. And it came to the House. We had some significant changes that we wanted to add to it. And of course, through at least about 10 days of negotiating, we were able to accomplish that and ultimately pass that bipartisan bill on April 23rd. That bill was generated out of the United States Senate, which is a Republican Senate. And we in the House worked with that Senate to craft, along with the President, a bill that has been very helpful since April 23rd. Now we have passed the HEROES Act that focuses on helping all of the frontliners that everyone has been thanking, from grocery store workers and otherwise, helping renters and people keep their homes, and a number of other very important elements to this legislation. And it's generated and originated out of the House. And so now it goes to the Senate. Rather than not collaborate, we would encourage your support of the HEROES Act, since it has items in there that impact you as realtors, as individuals, as family members, as neighbors, and get the Senate to negotiate. That means our two U.S. senators, so that we can pass this bill and begin to put the United States on a steady base. This money is drawn down. So if it is not utilized, it remains in the Treasury. And if it is not utilized by the states, it remains there to help them in the months to come. So I would hope that we get a strong support of the Houston Realtors in encouraging the negotiation, final passage of the HEROES Act that took a great deal of work and included issues that were covered by both Democrats and Republicans. That is what I think the nation now needs. And then, of course, I continue to do testing. We are today testing the essential workers. We're calling it Essential Workers Day. And so we'll be testing veterans and U.S. postal workers and healthcare workers, grocery store workers and transit workers, fast food workers, because those people have a hard time getting away to get tested. And the only way you stop the community spread of the coronavirus is that people are tested to know whether or not they are asymptomatic and therefore infecting people, which is what we did not know when we first started. That's what happened in New York, that people were asymptomatic and they were infecting whole family members because they had not been tested. So I would encourage you to support the work that we're doing to contain community spread, and as well support the HEROES bill. And certainly in the work that I'm doing, we welcome volunteers. And as I said earlier, we welcome the support to the efforts as I move toward the November election.
Great. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And thanks for all that you do, Congresswoman. We appreciate you.
Thank you, ma'am.
At this time, I'm going to speak on behalf of Mike and the HAR staff. And thank you so much for joining us today. I want you all to know that none of this would have been possible without the great staff at HAR. So kudos to Amber Burton, to Christina Schaefer, to Karen Driscoll, to Matt Burris behind the scenes. We appreciate you. We do want to recognize some members that were not able to join us that have always been with us at Tortilla Coast, and that's Congressman Al Green and his FPC Shad Bogany, as well as Pete Olson and his FPC Joanne Stevens. Those two individuals have always been great supporters of what we do, but their schedules would not allow them to participate today. Them not being here is no reflection of their commitment to the industry and to us. And so for that, we want to give a round of applause to the Houston Congressional Delegation for their support. Pat, thank you for staying on the line today with us on behalf of Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia. But thanks to each and every one of you for joining us today for the first ever virtual Congressional Hill visit. I speak for myself and for Mike by saying that your presence is appreciated, and your efforts in the community that we serve are also appreciated. So thank you for all that you do. And if there are no further questions, comments, or concerns, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, guys.